Good day. Welcome to Dylan's Daily Show. So over the past couple of days, Kanye West has been going off on Twitter. He's been tweeting a bunch of red-pilled / woke content, and it's pretty entertaining to watch. On Saturday, he tweeted that he likes the way Candace Owens thinks. Candace Owens is a conservative thinker. She works for Turning Point USA. She's African-American as well. And this is very significant, what's going on right now with Kanye West. And it's significant for one reason. And I know a lot of people are going to be watching this video saying, Dylan, you only point out the celebrities that talk positively about your message. You ignore the ones that don't. Yeah, there's a reason for that, right? Hollywood is, and just the entertainment industry in general, it doesn't matter if it's Hollywood, doesn't matter if it's, the music industry, whatever it is, the entertainment industry in general is a very powerful propaganda tool. And it's utilized by people on both sides, right? Mostly the left, because Hollywood and the entertainment industry is a leftist propaganda tool. The majority of people in Hollywood are on the left. And if anybody dares veer from that and come onto the right side, unless you're a big name actor like Vince Vaughn, Owen Wilson, someone of that nature, you're going to be shut out for most roles and things of that nature. But some people sometimes come out, like Kanye West, and just start speaking the truth, just start saying things that we really need to pay attention to. And when this happens, it's significant. I mean, this guy's got 15.4 million followers on Twitter. That's 15.4 million people that are seeing this. Now, they may not all look into it, but some of them may stop, they may think about it, they may look into it and learn something. Maybe they'll educate themselves because of this tweet, and that's why it's so significant. So I want to get into what he's saying, what it means, this is huge stuff, ladies and gentlemen. So, he talks a lot about freedom. He talks a lot about freedom of thought, freedom of speech, the thought police. He's saying stuff about victimization. The first thing I retweeted here, I retweeted a couple of them. If you want to see all of them, you can go to his Twitter. But the first thing I retweeted was self-victimization is a disease. So I got some food. Self-victimization is a disease. And it is. I mean, he's absolutely right about that. The next one I retweeted, there was a time when slavery was the trend, and apparently that time is still upon us, but now it's a mentality. Now it's a mentality. So what he means, right, is that, there was a time when there were slaves in this country. We all know about that. We all hear, but we have to be lectured about it all the time. You have to pay the reparations for owning slaves, even though I never owned a slave. My family never owned slaves. People who are expecting me to pay reparations were never slaves, but I'm still somehow expected by the left to pay reparations, right? But he says that, and it's true. It's a mentality. And we are becoming slaves to this idea of political correctness, this box that society wants to put us in. They want to put us in a box. They all want us to be the same. And this is a problem because people don't realize what's happening. Let's look at society as it's a road, right? So you've got a wide road. You can have people on either side of the road. There's a lot of stuff that can be said on the road. Everything's free to go down that road, all right? Now, let's say people come along and say, you know what, that word's offensive, that action's offensive, that action's offensive. It starts off with clearly offensive things that are derogatory, things that are demeaning, like the N-word or the F-word to describe homosexuals, things of that nature. And a lot of people say, okay, fine, let's get rid of that. So the road begins to shrink down. It begins to narrow, right? People say, okay, well, then they find new things. They say, wait a minute, that's offensive. I don't like that. Let's get rid of that. Oh, that's actually offensive. I want to get rid of that. Okay. Road narrows a little bit more. What happens is you keep pushing things out. The road continues to narrow until it's a one-lane road, and everybody is just following each other. There's nothing that can be said. Everybody is expected to follow this one road, say certain things. There are more things that you can't say than you can say. And that's where we're headed, right? Because this breach of freedom impacts everybody. It's not just limited to people on the right, which is what they're trying to do right now, right? I like to look at it this way. There are two major ideas of the way that that we should go right now in terms of this country. There's the leftist idea where they're saying, 76 genders, you can change your gender at any moment, legalize all this stuff, ban guns, you can't use any derogatory words, white people are evil, all of that. Then there's the more traditional people that are saying, you know what, I don't like the idea of that. I don't like the idea of my kid having to learn about 76 genders. I don't like the idea of saying white people are evil because we've done a lot to help all races around the world. But we're getting pushed out. See, it's our side that's being suppressed right now. But eventually it will be their side because freedom and the limits on freedom impact everybody equally. They impact everybody equally, and that's something that not very many people understand that are advocating for our freedoms to be taken away. If you start limiting freedom of speech, eventually that is going to come around and bite you in the butt. You may say at this point, well, we're limiting that radical person on the alt-right that's walking around saying racist things. Yeah, at this point you are. But once you start the slippery slope, once you say it's okay to start banning things, then when you say something that people don't like, it's going to turn around and impact you. Look at Jimmy Kimmel, for example, right? Prime example. He's been calling people out all the time. Then he referred to Sean Hannity saying he was a bottom, right? And that's something, I guess it was like a homosexual thing. The leftists attacked him. They just came out and attacked him and criticized him. He had to offer an apology. It turned around and attacked him and bit him in the butt. Even though he's all for political correctness, this politically correct culture that we live in. Now, I don't necessarily like people saying racist things. I don't like people coming out and saying things that can hurt other people's feelings intentionally or, doing things that are bad. But saying don't do that, that's not going to prevent anything. Limiting their freedom, saying you're not allowed to do that anymore, that's just limiting freedom, and that hurts everybody. That's not what we want. We don't want to become like North Korea. We don't want to become like China. We like freedom of the press. I don't want to turn into this country where the government controls everything. And, especially with the increase of technology, anything you do that breaches that freedom, it's caught on camera. Somebody's recording it, somebody's looking at it, somebody's reporting it, something like that. In North Korea, they actually convene once a week. And they go around and you're in these little groups, and members of your group turn you in for rewards for breaking the laws in their country because there's just so many of them. And people actually get turned in and thrown into terrible prisons with horrific conditions. They get killed because they violated these laws. And there's terrible punishments that impact generations down of the family on the family tree. I don't want that here. That's one of the things that makes us different. But he's saying that, now it's a mentality. Slavery is a mentality, and it absolutely is. Controlling what people say, that is a form of slavery. If you want to start banning what I can say in circuit, because it's not about banning. Don't look at it that way. It's not about you can no longer say this. It's here's what you can say. It's a list of things you can say. And if you say something that's not on that list, you can no longer say that. It's the same with guns, right? Do you really want the government telling you what guns you can own or you can't own? No. But they present it as a ban. They present it as, oh, this is good for society. Less people will die. We're getting rid of this. But in reality, they're just forming a list of things that you can have that's okay with them. It's the same kind of thing with words. When they start banning words, when they start banning actions, they're just giving you a list of actions you can do and things you can't say. The next thing I retweeted, I thought the thought police want to suppress freedom of thought. Absolutely. Because freedom of thought and freedom of speech go hand in hand. Now you may say, well, you can think things. Yeah. But what's the purpose of being able to think something if you can't say it? The only time when you're going to offend somebody, it's like what Jordan Peterson said when he said, in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. And that's exactly what Kanye West is talking about in his own little way. It may not be presented, it's just a kind of a Twitter mayhem, tweet, but he's saying it. That's exactly what he's saying. You have to risk being offensive in order to be able to think. If you want to be able to think freely, you're going to offend somebody. And by the way, you don't offend somebody if you're just sitting down talking to somebody in the park. If I'm just having a discussion with somebody, I'm not going to offend them. But if we start talking about politics, if we start talking about culture, if we start talking about things that actually matter, that's when you start offending people. And that's when people say, don't talk about that, don't do that. That's the problem. And that's how we head down a negative road. Do you think if the founders of this country, when they were sitting there debating how the country should be built, when they were sitting there, debating all of that, if they said, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, no, we'd be a much different country. It's the fact that they were able to get up and debate and have a friendly debate that made this country the way it is, because they all came together, they all had different ideas, they debated those ideas, and they came to a general consensus. And that's what we should do now, but the unfortunate reality is that is not happening anymore. That has ceased to happen. Now, if you go against a general consensus that's already established by the left, you shouldn't be allowed to say that. And it's getting worse. It's getting now to the point where minority groups are having meetings where white people aren't allowed to attend. And that's a problem. Because if that were to happen, if white people were to do that, and both people should have the freedom. Minority groups can absolutely have a meeting where white people can't attend. That's fine. As long as it's not in a public place or sponsored by a public organization, they absolutely can do that. That's a freedom that they have. But white people should be able to do that too. But if you try to do that as a white person, Good luck. He said we have freedom of speech, but not freedom of thought. I agree with that, but I would actually go a step further. I would say if we don't have freedom of thought, we don't have freedom of speech. And I think that actually, we don't have freedom of speech because there are societal pressures that are put on you when you want to say something. Society forms how people think and what people say and what people do, right? It's like Crocs. Remember, Crocs used to be the cool thing. Now, if you wear Crocs, people are like, those are the gayest shoes I've ever seen in my life. By the way, if you say gay, get ready for a backlash. But, those are the dumbest looking things I've ever seen in my life. It's like, now you can't wear Crocs. But before, they used to be the cool thing. And when everybody was saying they were cool, people had no problem wearing Crocs. A lot of people still own Crocs. They just don't wear them because they're not cool. That's an example. But think about it in a different way, right? Like, fat people, for example. You can't even criticize fat people. You can't even mention if somebody's overweight because they might get hurt. They might get offended. If you want to present it in a positive way, say, hey, you're a little overweight, you need to cut the weight there. You might have some problems down the road. If you're a doctor, right? They could get offended. You get sued. It could be a whole lawsuit. In California, if you misgender somebody, the punishment is worse than knowingly giving someone an STD. I mean, it just blows my mind to see the road we're going down. And when society puts up these barriers or societal norms are put into place, then people who may want to say something that they should have the freedom to say, well, they still may have the freedom to say it. They don't say it because of those societal pressures that are put in place. And that's what I mean when I say we may have freedom of speech, but not really because, the societal pressures are in place. The societal barriers, I like to call them, on what we can and can't say because society will accept it and they won't accept it. And then people who dare to come out and say the things that those barriers are preventing people from saying, well, they're labeled as crazy. They're labeled as insane. Which, by the way, they've done with Kanye West to some extent. I remember a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, he stopped a concert halfway through to go on this rant, and everybody was saying he was crazy. I mean, he was put in the psych ward. I mean, it was the next thing he said, question everything. And I think that's important. I mean, I talk about that on my show, and everybody should do that. If you hear me say anything, if you're listening to a podcast, if you're reading a book, and there's a fact in that book, definitely go look that up, right? Don't just take what I say. Don't take what anybody says and run with it like it's an absolute fact. Look it up, Google it, do your own research, and come to a conclusion. I mean, that's the beauty of the society we live in, is that yes, we can all say things. And if people did this, it's not society and the government's job to control people say. If I come out and I say something that's blatantly stupid and inaccurate, people will look it up, I'll be wrong, and my comments will be flooded. And I'll apologize. I'll say, yes, that was wrong. Whatever, I'll look it up myself. But that's how it should be. You shouldn't be controlling as the government what I say. But you should question everything. If the government passes a law, question it. Question gun control. Why do you actually want to pass gun control? Is this really about banning guns, saving lives, or is this about you having more control? Because that's surely what it looks like to me. You're so quick to advocate for gun control, you have armed security. Question everything. I mean, this is powerful stuff that he's tweeting here. Be fearless. Express what you feel, not what you've been programmed to think. And don't get me wrong. Again, the media, Hollywood, propaganda machine, they program you to think certain ways, to do certain things. It's all psychology. It's all psychological. It's like the impulse buy section at the front of the store. They have the candy bars, they have the drinks, and you walk by and you're like, oh, like that's all psychological. They know exactly what people are going to want. They know what level they should put the candy on. If you've taken any marketing class or business class, you know this. I mean, that's how it works. And it's the same kind of thing with the media. They present you stories. Like, let's look at the situation with police and African Americans, right? You're more likely to be killed by a cop if you're white than if you're black, right? They don't share that statistic. They also don't share when police officers do positive things for African Americans. All they do is they show, oh, police officer shoots African American, innocent African American, and it's before the jury has even decided what happened. They're just already bombarding you. So you're pre-programmed to think that cop is guilty. And that's what they do. They have an agenda and they push it. Just look at the way they talk about Donald Trump. Look at the way they talk about Donald Trump. Watch CNN, watch MSNBC. I don't watch it, but if you turn it on for 5 minutes, you'll see it's presented negatively towards Donald Trump and towards anybody on the right for that matter. And they do that intentionally. They want people to think a certain way. That's what the media does. That's why in movies they shove things down your throat so that, you know, you're sitting there, you're watching a movie, you think it's just a movie, but in reality the entire thing is propaganda. You have to awaken yourself to that. You have to realize that's what's going on, or else you will be susceptible to it. Everybody's susceptible to it. It happens. But be fearless. Express what you feel, not what you've been programmed to think. And that's exactly what Kanye West is doing. I mean, he's taking a risk. Now, he's big enough to the point of where it doesn't matter. People are still going to buy his music. But this is a brave thing that he's doing, is coming out and you know, first thing, I like Candace Owens. But here's why this is important, is because people are going to look at this and start thinking. That's the opposite of what the left wants them to do. That's the opposite of what the mainstream media wants them to do. They want them to just go down like sheep, follow this line, vote Democrat, especially minorities. You know, Republicans are racist, welfare is great, doesn't hurt you at all, even though it's objectively shown that since the introduction of welfare, you've seen the African-American community crumble in every single area where there's a prominent African-American community. It was more thriving in the 60s than it is now. There's more single-parent households than ever since the introduction of welfare. The education system has fallen apart in these areas. It's like the government is helping the African-American communities, but for what? The Democrats have done nothing, but they still want you to vote Democrat as a minority. You know, they want you to just be a mindless sheep and continue walking forward. And people just go with it. And then there's white people out there who are like, I'm sorry for being white. I'm so sorry. It's like, why are you sorry for being white? You were born that way. You can't help it. It's just like you shouldn't be ashamed to be anything. If you were born in a bad situation, work your way out of it. But anyway, if you want to check out Kanye West's Twitter and see what else he's been tweeting, be sure to check that out. By the way, I did launch a new clothing brand with a typical liberal. If you want to check it out, it is AmericaRebornApparel.com. The link is in the bio down below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and share. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any more. I will catch up with you guys next time. Bye-bye.